We'll call the meeting of the Ellis County Board of Commissioners to order. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag.
We'll call the meeting of the Ellis County Board of Commissioners to order. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with
We'll call the
liberty
meeting
and
of the Ellis
justice.
County Board of Commissioners to order. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Donna, if you want to call the roll.
Commissioner Dean Hazelhurst.
Present.
Commission Chair Butch Schleier.
Present.
Commissioner Dustin Ross.
Present.
Donna, if you want to call the roll. Any changes to the order of business tonight?
Present.
No executive
Chair
sessions?
Butch Schleier.
Present.
Commissioner Dustin Ross.
Prior minutes. We did get minutes from April 6th and April 16th.
Present.
Everything seemed
executive
fine on my
sessions?
end.
Okay, minutes stand as presented then. Prior minutes, we need a motion for the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through G.
I second that.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda
Any issues from
items
persons
A
not on
through
the
G.
order
I
of
second
business? Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda
Any issues from
items
persons monthly not on the department order of reports? business? Gentlemen, have a chance to read the report? Say aye.
Did?
Motion passes 3-0.
Look good?
What was your
Very
Like
business?
everybody was busy, extension on through, sign vandalism in the county and everything, and looked like everybody was busy.
The extension had quite a packet in
Oh
there.
my,
Stuff going on.
extension
Quite
on
a bit of
through,
stuff.
sign vandalism in the county and.
Okay, moving on to the
everything.
next
Looked
item
like
is the
everybody's
greater
busy.
lease purchase.
Had quite a
Bill,
packet in
Oh
there.
my.
Good evening, Commissioners. Bill Ring, Public Works Director. Before you tonight in the packet is a recommendation from staff to purchase a grader to replace a 2006 model that's basically down right now. It's been down for quite some time with right at 13,000 hours. And we had briefly discussed this at a previous meeting about there's a different way that we're looking at to finance this. And that was included in the paperwork from Foley Caterpillar. And they actually offered us a little better proposal on this than we had briefly talked about, in as much as that we will buy this for $1 at the end. We will own it at the end of 7 years. And based on history of graders and costs and whatnot, this machine in 7 years should still be worth somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000. So that will be our next trade-in on this particular machine. The same right now as we're trading in the 06 140H machine for $55,000. You know, this machine will be kept under full Caterpillar warranty, as they all are, but then as soon as the warranty's out, we can either choose to trade it immediately on another machine, or depending on where we are in 7 years financially, we own the machine for $1. And so if you want to wait 4 months or 6 months or 1 year, that we can still run it. It will be out of warranty, but we can still take care of it. But we will have a large residual value to go and replace it, you know, when you choose to do that, or when the commissioners at the time choose to do that. So that being said, I mean, it's the same model grader we've just bought 2 of. It's got the full warranty. It's got approximately 30 hours of demo time on the machine. We would get full warranty, you know, for the full 7 years and the full 8,500 hours. And it's priced the same as we have in the past, which we've been doing for a number of years now through Sourcewell, to get the full government discount on the machine.
And if we finance it through them, it's 3% interest, is that correct?
Correct. That's part of the program.
Bill, how do you feel about the 55,000 number? I thought for a machine that needs 80,000 and work, that's a pretty good number.
And that's
Great.
equivalent, the last 2 that we purchased, we had the twin to that machine that was traded in, and that's the number, I believe we got real close, within a couple of thousand of that 50 mark on that machine. It was a, you know, high hour machine, But they can, being the dealership, they can take that in and, have their folks go through it, and then they'll be able to, put it out for a decent machine for somebody that's, wanting to start, or a company that might only use it, every so often.
Did you ever ask them by chance if we could run that through that full factory rebuild program like we did the scraper?
A grader? Yes. And the answer I got, it would probably not be cost effective, because graders, government, us being one,
Sure.
graders are the largest commodity that Caterpillar sells to government.
Okay.
So we get the best price getting the government discount on these, as opposed to what someone else might. In other words, this same machine could be right now 3.25 on the open market. And so therefore, if you look at all the numbers, what it's going to cost us you don't get a government discount on a rebuild. There's a set price
Sure.
that they charge for that. So it would probably cost us more to actually rebuild it. If you looked at the whole package,
Sure.
start to finish. So they don't recommend that, because of the value we get for the machine is a used machine. We're going to get that. We're probably going to pay that much more to do a full CAT certified rebuild, where we could buy a machine and then actually spend less money.
So for $35,000 a year, we're gonna get a full factory 7-year, 8,500-hour warranty, correct?
Correct. All we're responsible
Just
for is
maintenance.
the basic
Tires.
maintenance that we do: tires, oil filters.
Does that include service calls also?
Correct. There's no charge for that.
No charge at all, okay.
Right. That's built into everything we buy from Foley. And this will also include, because we always spec out what's called, and it's a brand, it's called Snow Plus, when it comes to the special tires that we run. And they work very well for when we're out dealing with winter weather, as well as they work very well on when we're not. So that includes putting Snow Plus tires on the machine. And it also comes with the mold board, which is the center grading device underneath it. Normally comes 14 foot, we run 16 foot, and this comes with the 2-foot extension as part of the package.
I did do a little bit of research just to see what kind of things were available similar to what we're looking at here, and you're correct. I mean, everything I saw was 20 to 30,000 more than what our price quote is here, and some with more hours than this one. So Sourcewell does seem to get us where we're highly competitive, where you can't find any kind of listed prices anywhere online close to this.
And you're getting the fact that they sell the government graders cheap. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a double win for us.
No. 3% doesn't seem out of line. You did say that this came in a little better than we thought. We
Well,
thought
we
there
were
was gonna be some
talking
more
about
purchase.
not doing a buyout. The
Okay.
original one was going to be a lower price, but no buyout.
I got you.
And that was their original one of the, they were trying to come up with a good proposal for us, and then they said that they would prefer that, and I thought it would be better for us if we can have a residual of 120,000 on a machine that we can use to trade in on, because at that time a machine could be 370,000, it could be close to 400,000.
Sure.
So the higher the trade we've got on the machine, the better off the county will be.
Well, I think there is a beauty to the buyout option, only in the sense that it looks like there's all kinds of caveats on the machine when you give it back to them that could beat us up down the road. But if we can just hand them $1 and keep our machine, we don't have to worry about slight damage and things like
Correct.
that over the years, where they deem it where it's
And-
not in regular wear and tear condition.
Kudos to our shop, they don't let machines, because of the price of what it costs us for one of these. It doesn't get scratched up, it doesn't get abused, and if it gets broken, it gets fixed right away. I mean, some stuff is unavoidable. I mean, you have a tree limb fall down out, in a storm, you're out working, but we take care of it and get it done right away. And we use all genuine Caterpillar parts, and we use them when it's either warranty are outside of our capabilities because of size or other restrictions, we use Caterpillar service on the machines.
Didn't that work?
That's all tracked now as well. Everything that you want to know about this machine, anybody at Caterpillar can bring up any one of our pieces of equipment. They can see when we serviced it, they can see how many hours, they know where it's been.
Didn't one of these, Bill, one of these you were looking at have that slope control on? This must not have been the one, huh? I thought I seen it on this one, but now I don't find it.
I believe that was on, this has got the auto articulation, but the slope control was on a different machine they offered.
Because this has auto articulation, but it doesn't have slope control.
Right.
Okay, I thought it did, and I didn't find that again.
A couple of the other ones do have the auto articulation on it. And all that is, you know, in the machine, it's actually two pieces. It's right behind the cab, there's a kingpin. And so when you go into a curve, your tail end is going to track different than your front end. But with auto articulation, the computer tells it how to follow itself around. It steers for you. So when you're doing a tight curve, you're not tracking outside of your work area. It's a neat option.
Sure.
It's going to be, it's called an option now, and I'm sure within a couple of years, you won't be able to buy one without it.
Well, Bill, if we purchase this, when would you expect delivery?
2 weeks.
Oh, that's quick.
Because they have a demo, and our machine is red tagged right now because of the issues with it. We didn't want to, because they've already come in, to look and give us the price on it, and they're standing with the price, the 55. So we tagged it because we don't want to have anything else go wrong. But they have the other machine. It's either at Salina or Wichita. And all they got to do is they'll bring it out. They'll swap some of our stuff, what I would call our personal stuff that we put on the machine. They'll swap that over, and so it could be less than 2 weeks.
Okay.
It's basically as soon as I call them and tell them it's good to go, we just can get it processed. Because the other machine is actually, they've already lined up what needs to be transferred and clean the machine out, get, this, like the radio, we use county radios in it. That's already out of it because we're not going to use the machine again. So it's ready to put back in the new machine.
And as far as the financial impact on it, it looks like we're going to transfer money to your budget to pay for this on an
Correct.
annual basis? Okay.
Was that the recommendation of the administrator?
I think that's good just to keep in line with what's being spent out there a little better than the fund type
We're only
spending.
laying out 35,000 versus 287,000.
Yeah, it makes it easier to be a budgeted item that way.
It is a little different than what's been done in the years past. Usually they'd pay it outright for, the 300,000 for the grader out of Fund 16. This will be budgeted out of the Public Works Department and the general fund with two other lease purchase agreements that they have in there. And it's just for the auditing purpose and bookkeeping. You don't bring the money into the general fund and then transfer it into the special machinery fund to be able to make your payment. It just eliminates a step, keeps all your lease purchase payments together,
Sure.
and it's in a budgeted fund that way.
I did have a discussion with a friend of mine that is in the equipment business, and he said it's hard to get away from these lease options. They're pretty great at protecting you because we could shell an engine or transmission, and we're out no money in this type of option, and really it's in line in pricing too with that buyout option.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also did speak to the county counselor. He will get the contracts and review those as far as, take care, make sure that that's all taken care of.
Okay. Okay, gentlemen, do I hear a motion?
I move the commission approve the purchase of one new 12 M3 Caterpillar grader from Foley Equipment for $223,400.90 with their lease purchase option at 7 years for $35,857.13 a year. This would include trading in the 2006 140H grader.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you, commissioners.
next item is the grant writer and the Northwest Kansas Planning and Development Commission.
Sorry, one more.
Unless Jason really wants to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Dustin.
This is a line item I wanted added as we see a little bit of income from our sales tax collection. I think it's important for us to get an eye on how we can most capitalize on the funds. And discussion in the past and discussion I've had with some of the department heads was the idea that we have a dedicated grant writer on staff somewhere in the county. The hard thing with this is it is an added expense, but the likelihood of this position bringing in 10, 20-fold of their position's cost a year in different things for our fire, EMS, health department, sheriff's department, even for our potential road infrastructure projects. I feel like we were somewhat lucky in the sense that Phil was very good at writing grants and was able to work with Bill and get that the grant funding for the Northwest Business Corridor. But as time continues and we look to invest for the future, I think this is a discussion maybe we should have, along with the idea of what are we going to do in the future with Northwest Kansas planning. Because if we have this position, I don't believe that we would need to stay in line with Northwest Kansas planning. But I also know that everyone has spoken highly of it to me in the idea that they have grants, they see grants, but do they have time to be able to go through and put them together? And they aren't grant writers, so the idea that we have a grant writer on staff, whether, and this is the other part of the discussion I think we should have, is the idea that we share this grant writer in some aspects with the city governments in Ellis County as well. Whether they pick up a portion of the pay for that employee, I'm sure would have to be a larger discussion, but it's something that I feel like could be highly beneficial over the years, and just a way to be good stewards of any kind of influx in sales tax revenue that is coming in. I'm sure we'll have to have a discussion about the difference in how we collect taxes now and over the next 10 years as well, because we have a whole different funding mechanism that we've never really had in the sense of how it affects our general budget.
If we had a grant writer, Dustin, and you did mention all the issues they could be involved in with the county as well as other local governments in the county. How about the private sector? I know when we initially had discussion with Northwest Kansas Planning and Development, Adam Prey from the Platinum Group was here and talked about the grants he got through them. Would the private sector also be able to be included in something like this?
Yeah, I think that would be important. There is a funding mechanism that we do that I think is designed for the private sector that maybe Adam didn't look into, and that is our Grow Haze investment we made last year. Grow Haze is willing and able to help me on anything that I ever try to do. So I think there is a funding mechanism that we have added for that. And maybe that should be a discussion we have with Grow Haze and their ability to handle a potential influx that might be going to Northwest Kansas right now, planning, and could they handle it? But that's a very good question.
Mm-hmm. Have you researched, are there any other counties that are utilizing a grant writer?
I believe it happens all over the country. I did do a little research on what a grant writer, if one were to be a grant writer, what kind of salary that they would be searching for. It was just in passing, looking online of if I was a grant writer and I was looking for a position, what are they offering? What are these starting salaries? Range was $35,000 to $50,000 throughout the country. Usually I figure us on a mid-range cost of living comparative to, if you're in California or New York and you want to be a grant writer, I imagine you're at the top of that pay scale. And here I imagine we're mid-range. So with benefits, and I think Darren came up with it, it would probably end up being a net of $70,000-ish in costs once we paid benefits to the employee. So at that point, I think we had talked about a $41,000 expense on Northwest Kansas planning. That's what they wanted or requested anyway. I don't think we were in favor of spending that much, and we've been trying to get them more in line with what we feel the value is. But it did open the question at that point of the difference between $70,000 and a dedicated grant writer versus $40,000 and grant help over however many counties.
Mm-hmm. If we had a grant writer, do we have an office space to put him in? Has anyone thought about that?
Dustin and I briefly talked about that, and my comment to him is if we got to that point, we could probably find a location. It may not necessarily be in this office. And another question we asked was, who would that person directly report to, whether it be the administrator or a specific department?
Administrator.
But yeah, that was kind of our discussion too, with the administrator, but we necessarily don't have an office upstairs. There's space available, but.
We do have some space in the bottom of the EMS building that isn't finished out, that might be potential, even if it's not for our grant writer, that we could move positions around to find space in the administration building. But it is a good question because we're kind of at capacity in this building, even though it's a big building, But I know over the years we've talked a little bit about environmental, how it's a little odd in their setup in this building, and maybe that's the potential move, as they don't necessarily need so much of the administrative end in that couple offices across the hall here. It's a good question, though.
Well, I'm not necessarily opposed to this type of investment, but I do have to be assured that they could fill the need that Northwest Kansas Planning and Development is doing now.
Most definitely. I think that the beauty of the position is that we would constantly be able to see how effective it is. On a yearly basis. We would know what kind of funds they were creating.
Sure.
And know, I think the biggest benefit from our perspective is the idea that all these staff members can, when they see a grant that's a potential, they can come to this person to make sure that we're at least putting the funding requests out. Because I imagine we leave quite a bit of money on the table, and I think especially as we start talking about bridge infrastructure, they could really pay themselves off quite handily. And the other idea is that they stay and administer and help through the grant process, not just write the grants, because sometimes that's the hard part about it, is the end game.
There's always reporting.
Yeah, and we're seeing that right away with this build grant. It's work after the fact too. The nice check is great, but that's just the start of the real work. So it's definitely something I think we should discuss as we move forward. I think we would have to figure it out in the budget for next year anyway, so it'd be a matter of figuring out a way to budget it, and then deciding at what point we actually put out for the position and try to hire.
Dean, what are your thoughts?
I guess one thought would be I'd kind of like to wait to see when we get an administrator. Not that
Oh,
Darren-
absolutely.
Not that
Yep.
Darren isn't doing a great job, but I guess I'd like to see that first, and then I guess my biggest concern is where's that money going to come from? I mean, that's great if they write us all these grants, but we still got to pay the position. And I guess I'd like to even look at an outside source possibly as a contractor. I know there's people here in Hayes that write grants. I don't know what that would cost. Maybe that's even more. I have no idea. Maybe Dustin knows what that fee would be to write a grant.
I don't know. Contracting grant writers would be something I would have to look up. I'm not familiar with it at all, but I'm always in favor of contracting when we can.
You have a new project.
Okay. I do know the person that would probably be able to give me that information is Doug Williams at Grow Hayes. So,
Was that something you think Grow Hayes would be interested in, hiring a grant writer in their organization?
you know, that is a possibility too. If we were able to just add funding to Grow Hayes where they could add a grant writer that does all the work that we're talking about.
Because as soon as we hire one, right away, you got benefits and the
Yeah.
insurance.
Sure
I
you
mean,
do.
You have that
Absolutely.
employee for life,
Yep.
as soon as you hire one. If
I
we
think,
could,
and Doug's pretty savvy. I know Doug will say, "Well, you told me it'll cost 70,000," and I think in their office, they're running somewhat of a benefits package. Might not be as aggressive as our county one, but I know to get the level of skill that we're talking about, I imagine this is a $40,000 to $45,000 a year position, salaried position. So, but that's a good option, and it allows for these other city governments to more easily fund without just, putting money back into Ellis County
guess I'd like to
coffers.
see you research that with Doug and see if Grow Hayes would be interested in.
Yeah.
That way we don't have to put them under our payroll and in our budget.
Well, and we could probably do the same kind of investigation of size of community versus how much they should be doling out versus the county total, all that kind of stuff, and then make a proposal. And I'm good friends with Doug, so even if it were a thing where we figured that out, thought about it, talked it over with you guys, if you are okay with it, then we would proceed to go to city meetings and bring the proposal and request to see who might be on board.
I guess
To
I'd like
help
to
out.
see options.
Yeah, it's called Grow Hayes, but it is the Ellis County development. Investing in Ellis County is their motto. So they spend as much time as they can helping all of the communities. They just knew the big economic driver of Hayes, and I was actually on the Ellis County Coalition for Economic Development when they made the changes to the board, and I was one that bowed out and left the board because I felt like we had way too many board members and it was tough to get through a meeting. But it seems like they're on track and doing great things now, especially with housing and things like that. But that's a good idea. It really is the idea that we just funnel into an organization like that, and then it's a little less government controlled and a little more inner office good management controlled, which I think could be really necessary to a grant writer. To have Doug and Ernie there every day, making sure that we're getting grants out, that this is actually being done, maybe takes it off of our administrator to have to have another thing that they have to
I guess that's the
babysit.
way I'd like to go, Butch and Dustin.
Try to look at Grow Hayes and,
Okay.
well, it's a discussion we can have further. Okay.
You do have a letter here too.
Yes, I did give you, gentlemen, a email I got from Randall Raby with Northwest Kansas Planning and Development. And Randall is wanting to know if we are going to do anything with the 2020 dues. The attached email is the one I sent him earlier, which said we weren't. There's no funding in the 2020 budget to pay any dues. He did mention in this email that they are still doing some work for Ellis County and interested in if we want to do anything with 2020 dues at this point.
I don't at this point.
I don't know where we would get the money from.
I struggle with some of the reasoning too. I mean, SBA disaster loans and PPP loans don't seem like their wheelhouse. That seems like bank wheelhouse. I know a lot of people who have applied for PPP loans, and all you do is fill out paperwork from your bank, and you get approved within a few hours, and it's done. So, and maybe that's where the total of the organization I struggle with a bit. If we're the high payer, the idea that Northwest Kansas Planning and Development is not in Ellis County when we pay far and away the largest amounts of dues, and all of our businesses have to call Hill City to get help with these things, is another thing I struggle with their organization. But also, as you guys have alluded to, the money that we had put aside for them that they deemed wasn't enough for us to have a voting right on their board is gone. We have
Right.
reallocated that money.
It's gone. Okay. So maybe Darren, if you can send Ravi a letter saying we won't be paying any 2020 dues. Okay?
And in the future, I think that allows us the discussion with, I think that if we could come to an agreement with their bylaws and stuff in the future, it might be something that future commissions would be interested in. It's a good organization. It just came to a point where we didn't know that the worth was there for what we were paying.
Sure.
In total, so.
Just all the empty houses that were sitting in Hayes that they purchased from the VOTEC, and I think one of them's still sitting empty in Hayes, and one's still sitting empty in Trigo, or in Waukene. So, no.
Okay.
What's
Move-
your direction for, that's 2020 dues, what about 2021? Still undetermined at this point?
I think at this point it would be undetermined.
Yep.
Right. We're still having discussions.
And I believe county council has worked on their bylaws and what kind of changes needed made correctly. So at some point, we will address their board with that, probably later this year, so that they can make a determination of
Right.
whether they want Ellis County back with
We'll
them.
we'll have to determine if we want to go with Grow Hayes type situation or Northwest Kansas. It'll be an
Very
either
good.
or. Yeah.
Yep.
Very good. And I'll do that research with Doug and whoever I can get to see about contracting
Okay.
that type of position.
Sounds good, Commissioner. Okay, moving on. The EMS COVID pay. Jason?
Good evening, Commissioners. Jason Kennedy, Ellis County Health Services. I come before you tonight to ask for your consideration on a proposal for some COVID-19 pay. The action request would be to implement a $50 per week stipend for Ellis County EMS full-time employees. There's 24 of those, and a $10 per shift stipend for part-time employees that would come in and fill in if full-time staff are gone. Tonight, these are really unprecedented times. This request is really just in response to the unprecedented times and what's going on out there. I fully understand that this situation, COVID, has really impacted everyone in their own way. Some people are without work, some people are newly without work, some people are living on different levels of income based on what's going on. I understand the impact to this community is great. I understand that the long-term impact to this community will be even greater. I fully understand and appreciate that, and I empathize with the position that everybody's in. I also understand that EMS is not the only frontline workers out there. We work as a team with Hayes Fire, with the Sheriff's Department, with the Police Department, and all the support staff really from the county in its entirety. It takes a whole team to push us forward. I'm fortunate enough to represent and work with the great group of guys at EMS. I'm here to ask for that stipend to really incentivize, retain, and really hopefully recruit to show the level of care that we have for the staff at EMS, and to hopefully allow this situation to be less of an impact, at least on that group.
Okay.
And that would remain in place till May 4th?
I put May 4th as a reconsideration date, just because that's when the governor's state. In my mind, this is in response. We've been able to make some significant changes, even in the health department, even with my front desk staff. We've been able to make some changes with the county's policy that you guys put in place. We're good enough to put in place a couple weeks ago. We've been able to make some changes. EMS it's been really impossible to modify shifts or anything like that. We're at a bare minimum staffing every day. We have 8 people on shift. We need 2 people per truck. We've got 4 trucks. So it's really been, we haven't been able to make some changes there. So that's kind of a response to that. If the governor lifts the stay-at-home order, we all go back to generally the same level of risk. Everybody out there. Therefore, I don't think that our guys, and my guys aren't asking for this. EMS isn't asking for this. I'm here asking for it for them. But when the risk level goes back to the same across the board for everybody, I don't see a need for a continuation of this. So it's a redetermination date, I guess. I would come back and we could talk about it again at that point.
And this would currently cost EMS about $5,000?
Yeah, $5,300 for the 2 weeks. That figures in. We have our shift schedule set out for the next 2 weeks, so I figured that the number of days that are currently filled by part-time staff, and then the full-time staff is easier to figure. So that's $5,300 up until May 4th.
I guess some of the issue I have with this is my own personal attitude towards this whole issue, as well as I understand public perception and I understand the public sentiment when it comes to our healthcare workers and EMS personnel, all our frontline workers. Are there any other counties that are given hazard pay that
Yeah.
you're aware of?
Yes, Sedgwick County actually approved it, I believe, don't quote me on the date, I think 2 weeks ago. Now, they went with a more comprehensive plan. I will say they covered pretty much most of their staff. They actually, and they kind of, it was an interesting term I'd never seen, but they determined, they called it front-facing workers and rear-facing workers. So the front-facing workers were ones that had significant amount of either patient contact or contact with others in their job, and the rear-facing workers would have been people that had less risk, and they had two different levels. They were doing $200 a week for the front-facing workers, which would include EMS, SO, PD, those type of people, and then they did $100 per week for rear-facing workers.
Okay. Well, one of the issues I have with this is to, I guess, award EMS personnel with this kind of a stipend, and then we have our law enforcement personnel who are out there providing the same risk. They're at the same risk, and oftentimes maybe more because they don't have the PPE. And for me to really embrace this, I have to include law enforcement. I just have to. I can't tell Sheriff Harbin that his guys aren't as worthy as EMS personnel.
And I absolutely completely agree with you in that. They and I will also agree that the SO, PD, some of those guys, they might even have a little bit more of an elevated risk because they have to be in a combative situation that they might not even know about. Now, we have made some changes on that side. I will say that SO and PD, well, I don't want to speak for PD, but I know SO has, they do have PPE available to them. We've also changed our dispatch, the way that dispatch operates. They are doing a kind of a pre-arrival questionnaire, basically with COVID questions, so that we are doing our part to try and protect all of our first responders and really anyone that might have that patient involvement. But I absolutely agree with you. I would be 100% in support of something that is more encompassing. I'm the department head of EMS, so that's where this came from.
Gentlemen, do you have questions? Comments or concerns?
I was just kind of rereading that again here real quick.
I have similar concerns. I do think that there would be a precedence that's set where we need to talk about all frontline employees and what they would have. The other concern I have is the optics to the taxpayer right now. The price of a barrel of oil is negative $13 last time I looked.
Try $38.50 at 4 o'clock.
So I imagine we're seeing widespread people losing their jobs throughout Ellis County. And so the optics is something I'm concerned about from the taxpayers. And the good thing, I got to have a good discussion with Jason about it and what was going on, and that other counties were doing it. My suggestion on this, because yes, I would like, if we do it, I'd like to be fair to the PD as well, or to our sheriff's department. But my concern and my thought would be to table this, even if we have to have a special meeting next week to reconvene, to the point where we have more cases and possible greater risk to our frontline employees. Sedgwick, one of the hotbeds of the thing. I imagine, Johnson, Wyandotte, those counties were somewhat hotbeds for the coronavirus. So I'm happy with coming back on a special meeting, maybe reconvening with the sheriff's department about the cost if we were to do that for them as well, and then talking about what that total dollar amount is. But it was a hard thing. I even asked Jason, and he knows what the price of a barrel of oil did today. But, same way, I love that he advocates for the people that are going to work. He talked to me about the concern of going on the front lines, contracting COVID-19 and then taking it home to your family. So it is not an easy job, but we are in an economy now that having a job is important, and there are a lot of people without. There are a lot of people that would like to be back to work and going. So the optics is one of them, but precedence was, I think, my most important, because it's not a big dollar item. It's a perception from the community that I want to make sure that they know we're protecting
Sure.
their hard-earned dollars too.
Absolutely.
I guess that'd be some of mine too, just after rereading that again, just, I know the sheriff's officers are out there, helping with them, fire department, I know that, do they still assist? I think a lot of times, and they, they're probably frontline with you also.
The county assists us at request. So if we request them there, and those guys, I mean, we work great with all the public health services.
great
We
job.
truly have an amazing working relationship. So I don't necessarily, the intent of this was not to leave anyone out. And depending on your guys' direction, I'd be more than happy to look at anything different or a change to it that you think would make it more encompassing, whatever you guys want to do with that.
Yeah, that's what I think. Move to table, convene with the sheriff's department on what kind of cost structure we're looking for them. And I'm happy to do a special meeting next Monday, or as we maybe see an increase in patients and cases in Ellis County.
I think Darren can facilitate that too, if we decide to have one
Sure.
or not at that point. I guess let's just kind of see what maybe the cases do. I mean, I know EMS is definitely on the front line every day, every time that call comes in, but I also know our sheriff's department, highway patrol, I mean, they're all at risk. I mean, any service company in the community that has to go to somebody's house, I mean, Midwest Energy, I mean, I know Neil has to check meters at people's house, light, hot water heaters, et cetera. I mean, they're kind of frontline people too, as a service company. So I think let's just kind of monitor this and see what happens maybe next week, and we can talk about it again.
Okay, so we'll just table it for a week or two.
Sounds good.
Jason,
Okay.
make sure you keep in contact with us if we do start seeing an influx of cases or things like that. I think we could always make ourselves available if we need to get
Oh,
together
absolutely.
to
Definitely.
make sure they're taken care of. And if you have ever any issues with protection gear, you know that we're ready to pay on any of that at any point.
I
So
will say we have definitely worked with emergency management. As far as on the county side, we are appropriately protected with PPE at this point. We have plenty that we need. We have the training that has gone with it. Our guys on the EMS have been trained, the health department. We really do have appropriate levels of PPE at this point. So we are thankful for that, and that's something that actually the commissioners, I got to applaud you guys. You guys made an investment in that even years ago. That's been something that we've had, is the supplies and the money to purchase the supplies that we need. So we even coming into this had decent levels of PPE, and then emergency management has really done a good job of getting and staying up with the state and getting those resources shipped out from the state. So it's at this point now, none of us know what tomorrow looks like. We don't know what next week looks like. We don't know what the
Sure.
week after that. So I will say at this point, we do have appropriate levels of PPE. We have appropriately trained staff, and I've got a great group of guys that are willing to go out there every day and do what they can to help with this. I say guys, I mean team, staff members, health department, EMS alike. So they'll continue to do their job regardless. They're appreciative to have a job. They love serving the community, and so it's I can't speak highly enough of really all the first responders that we have in Ellis County.
Okay,
I do have one more thing to update you guys on. We did receive last week a $1,000 grant, Sunflower grant, through the health department, that's for COVID-19 response. We also received the first of what is believed to be 3 payments possibly through the preparedness program of around $4,300 in a grant. And then on Friday, I'm going to let Darren help me out on this one, but we did receive part of the CARES Act. We received a check for $41,000 and some change through the CARES Act. Now, I have not fully investigated. So that is a CMS fund money that came to us for fees for services, which would be EMS and health. The intent, I believe, was to offset lost revenue due to decreases in the fees for service really across the nation. So there are some stipulations that go with that I'm not exactly, right now, I don't know enough about it. So we have the money, but we really want to be sure that we do our due diligence in figuring out what that money costs us in the end. It is a grant at this point, but I do think that you have to sign some things that maybe make billing a little bit different. And so we're going to investigate that. Depending on which way we go, or we'll have a recommendation for the commission on whether we
Have you noticed a decrease in fees?
Actually, we haven't yet, but we're still, so like on the health department side, we view our fees for services 60 days out. So we're still seeing revenue from 60 days ago because that's kind of the general billing cycle. So we're still getting the good revenue. We have seen a decrease, a significant decrease in the fees for service that we provide. So we will see a significant decrease in revenue. I'm just not sure what that's going to look like yet. And then on the EMS side, we have seen a small reduction in call volume, but it's not been as much as at the health department. So I think we'll see a larger reduction in the health department. But that also is coupled with a vast majority of our fees for service there are vaccinations. And so after this is done, I think we're going to see a huge onslaught of people that are willing and want to actually vaccinate. So I'm not so sure that 30 to 60 days post-COVID, when we start coming back out, that we're not going to see a large increase in the public that are coming in to get those fees for service and those vaccinations. So,
Okay.
I'd imagine vaccines and antibody testing is going to be a huge portion of the next 6 months.
yeah, testing
Society.
Testing in general. So we talk about, COVID-19. There's a big push right now, really nationwide, to open states back up, to start commerce back again, to open back up. There's a lot of people are concerned with our testing capacity. So I know specifically the state of Kansas is addressing that. They are actually what they're called. It's called expanded testing, but they're working with health departments around the state to push KDHE resources, so state resources out to those areas to expand the testing criteria a little bit and to take some of the financial burden off of the patients. So they're offsetting some costs with the testing. They're actually offering the testing to the KDHE. They also have some point of care testing units that they're pushing out. Right now, they've obviously had to be, they've been sent to Ford County and some of those that are battling some outbreaks in localized populations. So they are pushing out some point of care testing. So I think the testing capacity is definitely coming on board and will, we've tested a significant amount of people really across the state. I think yesterday's numbers, it was 15,200 and some tests that the state has actually run. Now their data is not all inclusive. There's missing specifically some tests that were done here in Ellis County, quite a few. So I actually think their testing capacity is quite a bit higher. But if you look, 89% of the tests that come back actually come back negative, which means out of the whole population of symptomatic people, 89% of those are negative when they test. And these people that do have symptoms. So if you look at that globally, it is a good sign for Kansas that we don't have as widespread of community transmission as some might believe. We, especially out here in the western part of the state, we do see lower numbers, which is thankful. Everybody likes lower numbers. I do think there is some light at the end of the tunnel as far as the COVID-19 goes. I think that they shift the peak every once in a while, but I do think that thankfully the numbers look like they'll stay much lower than the predictive values, and the healthcare system is in great shape. As far as today, the predictive values show that we will have a surplus of 4,300 hospital beds statewide. That's just in the state of Kansas. So that's healthdata.org. That's their predictive modeling coming out of Washington State. So 4,300 extra beds, an extra 230 ICU beds. They're calling that we'll need 43 ventilators. I think Hayes Med has more than that as far as ventilator capacity, and that's really across the whole state. So I do think the predictive modeling is coming back, and it is looking better. It's showing that we will see reduced numbers, which is great. The healthcare system is strong. They have the resources now. We have PPE. I think we have some good things going for us in Kansas. Now it's how do we mitigate the other side of it? How do we come out of this? How do we open things up? And how do we continue to protect the at-risk population? What that looks like, I'm not sure anybody knows, but that's something that we stand ready to help address for the community with the Public Health Department, along with Hayes Med and really all the other regional health partners.
We got one last question. You talked about the couple grants, about 4,300 and 1,000, and you're unsure on this CARES Act grant where you want to look into it a little closer. Could that grant funding be used on for potential for this stipend, or would we have to account for it some way else?
So from the preliminary stuff that Darren and I looked at, I don't think it can specifically, at least the CARES Act grant. Now, the other two grants on the health department side can be used for employee compensation. They can be used for overtime. They can be used for really any COVID-related events. I have not had an opportunity to go through the CARES Act money, but it is something that we would be able to offset costs somewhere else. We can use it to purchase equipment, anything really that's COVID related as far as that would be necessary for response and for caring for Ellis County.
Great.
Okay.
The main goal for that, there's a lot more specifics, but just something real short and sweet. The funds are used to, in quotation, prevent, prepare for, or respond to coronavirus. And there's a little list of things that you can get in there: staffing, training, PPE, supplies, emergency operations center costs. So there's some variations in there where you can use it to.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Neil, from the private sector, I mean, you guys are out there entering a lot of houses. Do you guys have all the protective gear? Do when you have to go in and light a hot water heater or something? You guys do, huh? Okay. That's good to know.
Thanks. Got them some equipment. And
Oh, you
did a
guys
few
did?
shipments, yep.
Oh, okay. Good.
Okay, moving on. Fire department donation. Lyle.
Good evening, Commissioners. Lyle Pantel, Assistant Director of Ellis County Fire and Emergency Management. Last month, March, we had several firefighters go on standby for a prescribed burn for a landowner in northeast Ellis County. They were on standby to help protect any unwanted burning area or neighboring properties. And then last week, we received a $100 donation check from that landowner. And it's been prior practice to bring those donations to you for acceptance, and what we were going to dedicate that money to, which we would like to build 2 training props. One would be a 4-foot by 8-foot ball maze, which we could use to hone our firefighters' skills with our rescue airbags, which are used to lift heavy objects, vehicles, semis, very heavy objects can be lifted by those. And then the other game training prop would be a 4x4 Jenga game, if you're familiar with that. We would use our rescue tools that help with vehicle extrication and kind of refine and hone those skills for that purpose.
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
Very good.
Yeah,
All right.
go for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next agenda item is a sales tax letter. Darren.
Good evening, Darren Myers, Intern County Administrator. Sent the commission a draft letter in response to the commission's request to request funding from the city of Hayes as part of the Northwest Business Corridor to help supplement the offset or the gap that we have in funding. It was the original intent of the commission to wait to ask for this funding request for the city until after the sales tax results were known, realizing that we couldn't really ask the city for something that they couldn't know if they were going to have or not. Since the sales tax results are available now and we know that funding will be there, that letter was drafted, and if the commission approves that for the board chair to sign, I can get that delivered to the city of Hayes as soon as possible.
Okay, any discussion, gentlemen?
Nope, thought it was well written, Darren. I guess you wrote that, huh? Did a good job.
Yeah, I think so too.
I did have a few calls on it just from Hayes Post and that from people read on there, but I've been working with Bill and he's got some things that we can look at later, so or next week, whenever, but anyway. No, thank you very much.
Yeah. Commissioner Ross, any comment?
Darren, just to give us a total, it would be just slightly over $1 million that they would be in total on the project, I believe.
Correct. If they were to approve and move forward with 750,000, they've already, as you remember from the sales tax that sunsetted in April or October of 2018, they gave us a portion of that, which was roughly $284,000. And then, if you add those up, it's just right at $1 million. And the city manager is also committed $25,000 as well, and that could change as part of this proposal. So it would be right at, just under or above, depending on what funding that they would approve at, right at around $1 million.
And then we also committed our 1.5 million. We gave that back to the city for that 55th improvement intersection.
Correct. Earlier, I believe in January, we
Yeah.
submitted documentation to KDOT, so that way that $1.5 million grant was given to
The city instead
that
of the
project
county.
there. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's do the letter. Okay, our next item is the 2020 pay adjustments.
As a discussion a couple weeks ago, the commission chair asked that we bring this to the commission's attention in April. And I tried to get a little sooner, but with our schedules and trying to get everybody together, we had to take some work to get done, all the budget spreadsheets as well as the Wage and Benefit Committee to get together to make a proposal, which is part of your packet. They took into consideration the commission's suggestion of a COLA increase of no more than 1.6%, which is what the 2020 increase is for Social Security COLA, and then continue to implement what the past 4 years has been with the different cost or salary adjustments for the last 4 years, is to finish off the final stage of the Evergreen study, is what it was called. Believe the study was done in 2015 and the policy was implemented back in 2016 in a multi-year phase to complete that study. That last phase this year recaps or captures the newer employees from 1 to 5 year range, and there's a couple that are in a 6 year range because as you implement this over multiple years, some people that were in the group last year are now in a different group this year, but they didn't get the raise last year. So it's there's a couple that fall through the gaps, but we try to identify those. The Wage and Benefit Committee looks at that, and then we take that suggestion and look at what the commission approved for the 2020 budget year. This year, the commission has already budgeted a pay raise. It's just not in the individual budgets. The commission determines what the amount is and then when to set it based on the funding available and the percentages or the type of pay raise that is giving or is going to be given. And with the remaining funds that are available, as you can see, it would be $140,068 transfer from the budget stabilization account into the individual accounts to that was previously budgeted for those pay raises.
Okay. And this would go into effect 1st July, is that correct?
This would go with the money that is budgeted. Pay raises would take effect May 3rd, but the first paycheck that the employees would get the raise on is May 22nd.
Okay, May 22nd.
And the reason it's a little bit before, last year is the first, I believe it was the first week in July, but last year the pay raise was a 2% raise. So when you look at a smaller raise, that means you can start it a little bit sooner in the year. And then there was some of those employees, they get impacted differently depending on which group are getting the step adjustments for their years of service. And if the commission were to approve this would complete that study that the commission approved back or went through back in 2015. This is that final step.
Okay. Discussion?
And I will add, just because it was asked today, this does not include the previous salary adjustments that were done at the beginning of the year for the
Right.
5 elected officials and 2 other employees that were adjusted as well.
Sure, understand that. Yeah. Commissioner Hazelhorse, any comments?
It'd be nice to complete this study that was done, well, back in 2015. I also just think of all the people that are unemployed in Ellis County right now with everything that's going on.
Sure.
So it makes it a little tough to approve a raise when I think of hundreds and hundreds of people that are presently unemployed. I mean, one business alone I know laid off over 300. And I think it's only going to get worse. But I do know we committed to this back in 15 to do this, and it's been going on for 5 years. It would be nice to say it's done. And we do have the money budgeted for it from last year already.
Commissioner Ross?
Just a couple things. I agree with the sentiment. I want the evergreen study gone. I would like us to burn it and shred it, and I'd like it to be over. I think we should have done that 3 years ago, but it would be nice to finish that, say we did a study, get it finished, and then I think the future for our commission is to be more flexible about how we pay. And
Definitely.
I do not like COLA adjustments for employees that are making above $50,000 a year. I don't believe cost of living changes affect their finances enough to make those changes. I also think that there was a little bit of a miscommunication between the commission and the previous administrator in the sense of what we were willing to spend on this COLA. We were budgeting around $160,000 considering a 2% increase in COLA. When it came back at 1.6, my intention was that we would spend then 80% or that 1.6 instead of 2 amount of money, and the rest would go back into the general fund. That being said, we have spent some of the money on the pay increases on staff we felt were underpaid from all the study that we did earlier in the year. But I firmly believe we need to finish the steps 1 through 5. And I know this will take some math, and I don't think it works the way that we set up the pay scale now, but in the future I think it should. The idea that at some point of employment at Ellis County, you're not eligible for COLA raises because you are a salaried position and you know what amount of money is coming in at any given time, and that amount of money is ample to not have the price of housing or the price of gasoline or things like that affect you. Right now, the funny thing about COLA is it always seems to go up, but gas doesn't always go up, so we know that right now. We know that sometimes gas is $3 a gallon, and right now, when I drove to the commission chambers, it's $1.32 a gallon. So the idea that things are more expensive are sometimes statistically put together in a way that is tough to understand. But my suggestion is that we budget $128,000 for these pay increases, not the $160,000. We take off the pay increases that we had for our multiple employees, and then we set in our cost of living adjustment based on how much time left is in the year on that. Same with Dean. I think that the visual of this is important to the taxpayers. I also think that saving money right now in county government is incredibly important as we look at what next year's budget may be. If all the oil under us is worth negative $27 a barrel, all it is a holding site for oil. It's worth negative. So that's my suggestion. I think that originally, that was my thought process in my proposal to stick with the way the government would set the COLA and not an automatic 2%. But I don't know how you guys felt about that, and it could have been something that I was misunderstood by all people. But my thought was we spend less money if the COLA comes in under 2%.
Yeah, that was my thought too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did the quick math on it. I thought that ends up putting us around 130, but we would have to do that math and reconvene at the next commission meeting and then finish the idea of what we're going to do. But 100% in favor of those 1 to 5 years. I want to finish that evergreen study, and I think that should be factored first before the COLA is implemented for the rest of the employees.
Okay, so we
Because
want to
that's
take
been
this up
hanging
at the
out
next
there.
meeting?
Yep,
Okay.
definitely.
So table it to that, and we do the math on what we can get to.
So tell me exactly what you're wanting, so I don't,
Do you have the original budgeted amount there? I believe it's around a
I
160,000.
think you're
We
right.
budgeted 2%.
Yeah, so whatever that came out to.
I thought it was like 160, 448 or something like that.
$152,636.
Okay,
636.
And the commission has already approved $12,345 in raises.
Okay, and that's on this agenda item. Say that
That's
number again, 12,000.
$12,345.
And the original was 152.
Mm-hmm.
152 and how much?
152,636.
So 152. I should probably not, when I'm on a microphone, I should just do the math in my head and not say, what we should spend is $121,890.40. Subtract 12,345, and we have 109,545.40 left for pay raises. Implementing the 1 through 5 step first, and then the rest of cost of living adjustment at whatever point, at whatever pay period that hits on.
So when would you, there's a lot of variables there. If you decide to do the steps 1 through 5 first, when would first be? Because we have to determine pay periods to determine how much is left to be able to figure out what the cost of livings are going to be.
That's a good question.
At our next meeting.
We'll do it at our next meeting.
We can
Yeah,
talk about it then for the final draft.
Yeah, I would say implementing them at the point of our motion or the next pay period, and then factoring in the COLA adjustment for the rest of the employees from that pay, after that pay increase.
Basically, after our next meeting, we'll bring it up, and then that would be put into effect sometime in May.
The step adjustment in May, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that pushes the back into June.
Sometime in there is when we would do the next one.
It'd be May 17th would be the start of the pay period, which would be a June, first week
Okay.
of June-ish check. That would be for your step raises for your employees 1 through 5.
Okay.
And then determine out how much that is for the rest of the year, and then we can figure out with what's remaining out of that $109,000 after those adjustments are given. Then we can figure out when to implement the 1.6 for everybody else. Okay.
That's what I believed our discussion
Sure.
was, and I think it was a miscommunication between me and Phil, or the commission and Phil, about how we wanted to do that. Although I know how the budgeting process works, I think that we should be leaving money on the table in this budget because of the lessening of the COLA. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
I will have something for the May 4th agenda, I believe.
May 4th.
Okay, moving on. County Administrator Report. Darren?
I have nothing.
Okay. County Commission Reports. Commissioner Hazelworth.
I have nothing.
Okay. Commissioner Ross.
The only report I have is had a discussion with Representative Wassinger today, thanking her for pushing on the governor a bit about reopening our economy, to have a plan and implement a plan. I know she was instrumental in putting that letter together and is now working on a joint House and Senate letter to start the plan to open up our economy. It is starting to hit very hard, and I believe that is the trick of governance. The idea that the cure for any disease should never be worse than the disease, and we are tiptoeing and borderlining that. Mental health is going to be in a crisis. Financial health is in a crisis. Even for the state's budgets, our budgets, cities' budgets,
Sure.
and most importantly, our taxpayer household budgets. So I thanked her for leading the charge on that. She said it wasn't easy. She said our governor has said to her that she believes this is all political. And to that I said, you're the leading politician in the state of Kansas. Everything that comes to you is probably political. We want to go back to work.
Absolutely.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. And I have no report. And with that, we will adjourn this meeting. If I can find the time here.
6:11.
At 6:11. Thank you, Dean.
You betcha.